Kenya's finance ministry is working to bring back some of the tax measures that the nation's lawmakers were forced to abandon after weeks of deadly protests. The taxes that formed part of the Finance Bill 2024 and aim to raise about 344 billion shillings, that's about $2.7 billion in the current fiscal year, were scrapped after the demonstrations in the country led to the deaths of more than 61 people and forced President William Ruto to sack his entire cabinet, including then Treasury Secretary John Mbadi. This morning, Professor Xen Iraki, an economist at the University of Nairobi, joins me to talk about this. Thank you so much, Professor Iraki, for joining us.
Hello, good morning.
So first, let's even look at the impacts of the proposed tax measures on Kenya's economy and how might they affect the country's fiscal outlook. We'll start from there.
I think everybody was surprised when we read in the media that we might have the Finance Bill 2024 being introduced. And one of the biggest concerns is if it is reintroduced, we expect some new taxes. And as usual, when there are new taxes, the price of goods and services goes up. So people are fearing that if there's a new tax bill, there will be new taxes, the cost of living will go up. And remember, that's what people are protesting over. If the government does not raise taxes, it has the option of raising money through borrowing, and eventually it is people or Kenyans who will pay that particular debt. So whichever way you look at it, there are concerns about the finance bill if it is reintroduced.
So this is actually more or less like testing the resolve of Kenyans, because this probably would mean increase in levies of essentials like bread, other staples, and probably other essential items for the average Kenyan household. Don't you think this is like threading a thin line?
You know that's interesting, because as an economist, if you don't raise more money or more tax revenues, then the easiest way to do it is to tax the essentials, bread, fuel, and the diapers and other things, because those are things that inevitably somebody must use. But when you look at it from the other political point of view, if you try to tax the essentials, then a lot of people will be angry. People will be angry because once you tax the essentials, prices must go up. People feel the suffering. And if you remember what Kenyans were demonstrating, one of the issues was over taxing essentials. So I'm hoping that in the new finance bill, if it is ever reintroduced, the essentials will be taken care of. They are not going to raise taxes on the essentials. That will annoy a lot of Kenyans, a lot of consumers. And I don't think the government wants that.
So if we are going to probably, amend these tax laws to focus more or to focus away from staples and essentials, are there other commodities or maybe services that you would feel that these tax should look into that would not directly impact the buying power or the finances of the people?
One of the discussions I hear on the Kenyan streets about taxes, raising new taxes, is that we don't need to raise taxes. If we can stop the waste, if we can stop corruption, then probably we don't need to raise more taxes. We can save enough money to fund the government services, wages, salaries, and provide services. But if you must tax or raise new taxes, the government will probably focus on luxuries. And one area that has been of keen interest has been cars, maybe airtime, and all other areas that are not as luxuries. So I think there'll be more focus on anything that is seen as luxuries by the government or by individuals, not essentials.
So there are also talks around the fact that we don't know if there were stakeholder engagements before the finance bill was brought into place in the first place. And now we're looking at probably public participation, the private sector also coming in, stakeholders and other well-meaning citizens in the country coming in to have a discussion about this particular tax under the finance bill, even if it is going to be introduced, so that when the implementation will be coming up, it will influence matters or parts of these taxes that would not again raise the tensions of the people. So do you think this would mean, this would actually form a meaning when it comes to introducing these taxes?
When you look at the verdict by the judges over the unconstitutionality of some of the finance bills, one of the big linchpin, one of the turning points happened to have been that there was no public participation. And the big question is not whether there will be public participation. It is whether even if the public participates and give their views, whether it's the private sector or individuals, it is whether their views will be taken. there has been, for example, something raised about some of the issues people raised over the new cabinet. So I think by having extensive public participation, that might probably buy the public, and the public get persuaded that the new taxes are for their good, and maybe there will be less tension if that can be done as it is put in the constitution. Remember, public participation is the new constitution, and any major public decision must have that.
And now we know that there is a new Treasury head in John Mbadi. And we, of course, we like to find out when it comes to balancing economic growth and fiscal responsibility with this new person in place, what do you think his focus should be and his role should also move around?
I think his first focus should be making sure that there is consultative public participation. And the other focus should be making sure there's less waste, there is less corruption. Because as far as I'm concerned, every Kenyan wants to pay taxes. No Kenyan has ever said, even when they were rioting, that they don't want to pay taxes. Or they are saying, we want to see prudent use of our taxes. So the new minister or the new cabinet secretary must make sure there's more public participation and that all the taxes that are collected are put into the right use. And I believe if Kenyans start seeing where their taxes go, they'll be more willing to pay taxes.
I'm more concerned about the policy trajectory of the William Ruto administration when it comes to economic policies, and of course how it translates between the executive and the judiciary, probably of course with the legislative arm also, when it comes to formulating policies that would try to liberate the Kenyan economy, but then does not put so much burden on the people. What is the focus of William Ruto in this line of thought?
I think if you listen to President Ruto during his campaigns in 2022, when he wanted to become the president, I think his intentions were very clear. He wanted to make sure the country gets out of debt. He wanted to make sure the country gets transformed economically, so that whether you are rich, whether you are poor, you can see the economic growth. I think his vision, his intention were very good, were very noble. But I think when it comes to the reality of funding those intentions, there has been some headwinds. You cannot get enough, you cannot raise enough taxes in tax revenues. You cannot get enough money from loans, and the interests have been going up. So I think the most important thing he needs to do is to balance the economic intentions, the political reality, and the public sentiments. And that's not easy for a politician. It's not easy for a politician in Kenya, in Tanzania, in Nigeria, everywhere. But that's the reality on the ground.
So even talking about this intention and these policies, Professor Iraki, are they actually homegrown kind of policies that speak to the peculiarities of the Kenyan economy? Or it is actually IMF and World Bank induced? Because, the stories flying around is that we have these policies coming into play as being tendered by these international institutions that really do not speak to the perennial issues of the Kenyan economy. Neither does it actually tackle the issues around, the impediments and the handlings around this economy. And all we have is that the IMF has just rolled out policies in terms of restructuring talks and the need for the Kenyan government to be able to access some kind of funds or bailout. So we need to understand that part too.
I think when you look at the policies that President Ruto came up with and his government, they are homegrown. If you look at one of his most famous mantras, the hustler movement, the hustler fad, making sure that the bottom-up approach, such that the people who are at the bottom of the pyramid are uplifted. Those are homegrown policies, and that's why they work very well politically, because we have a substantive number of Kenyans who are poor. There are a lot of Kenyans who dream of becoming rich. So those were homegrown policies. But when it comes to implementing, you need money for that. And that's where IMF comes in. That if you don't raise enough money from tax revenues, from loans, you may have to turn to IMF. And IMF or World Bank gives its conditions. And what has been happening the last 30 years or so, that the conditions given by IMF or World Bank do not always tally with the reality on the ground. Remember, the president and his government are on the ground. You know what is happening. IMF might not have that intimate knowledge of the political and economic situation in Kenya. And that's why there's that conflict. That's why some people have even gone on the streets demonstrating or protesting. And one of the issues they raised is that IMF is having too much sway over the Kenyan government. So what we need to see is a policy or some policies that balance between the aspirations of the president, the aspirations of the Kenyan people, and the conditions given by IMF. And that's not easy.
Okay. Professor Exon Iraqi, economist, University of Nairobi. It was nice talking to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you and have a good morning.